Okay, we're doing more quotes from Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by me, Pete Rogers, alphabetical order. Howard Ruff, he's a writer like about financial stuff. He says, "It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. When you mess up, fess up, and make up." That's a good one. "If I could teach my children only one thing, it would be marketing. For with that skill, they could be successful in anything they chose for the rest of their lives." And I would say there's a lot of truth in that. And Kiyosaki says something similar. Basically, sales is the most important thing if you're trying to make money because you have to sell stuff. And he asked his audience, this is Kiyosaki, he said, "How many of you can make a better cheeseburger than McDonald's?" Almost everybody raised their hand. "How many of you could sell cheeseburgers better than McDonald's can?" Nobody raised their hand. So that's where the money comes from the sales. So a lot of times the product stinks, but there's good salesmanship. So that's a valuable thing for somebody to be good at sales for any business. Teofilo Ruiz, he wrote a book about religion and stuff. He says, "There are many for whom the course of their lives shows little or no departure from well-ordered routines. As comforting as this may seem, in the end it is an unspeakable horror." Yeah, I just think if you're intelligent, you want to do something with your life. You want to take what you've time and opportunity and skill you got and do something that's meaningful to you. Whereas if you always just do what's expected of you, and you'll never do anything, because expectations are always within the limited bubble of boredom and predictable. Okay, Benjamin Rush. He lived from 1745 to 1813. He was a USA founding father, a physician, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And this is a good one here because this is what the founding fathers were like. Because there's a lot of this BS trying to say, oh, America wasn't a Christian country. No, America was founded as a Christian country, and it's supposed to be a Christian country. But the stupidity of the proles and the Christians has allowed it to turn into a country run on atheistic Darwinism. And the more that continues, the more it'll turn into a third world crap hole. Because most of the countries around the world are like atheistic Darwinism, third world crap holes, okay? It's only Christianity that can make things better. There is no other religion. There is no other philosophy that can do it. And I realized that big money don't want it, and big money's got the power to make sure it don't happen. So America, might never get better. But that's what it takes, because you have to have people value something above money and power. Because if they don't, then money and power is just going to always control everything. All right, so here's a quote from Benjamin Rush. "I have alternatively been called an aristocrat and a Democrat. I am neither. I am a Christocrat. Christocrat. Christianity is the only true and perfect religion. And in proportion as mankind adopts the principles of Christianity and obeys its precepts, they will be wise and happy. Let the children be carefully instructed in the principles and obligations of the Christian religion. This is the most essential part of education." Now, that's an important point. This is the most essential part of education. I would agree with that now. I've read about 250 books on education, and I have studied and thought about it for a long time and looked at it from multiple different angles. And I can tell you, that's the most important thing you can do, is have kids read the Bible. They can start out with some children's Bible, a lot of pictures. And I'll show you, here's a book that I just finished recently. It's called How the Scots Invented the Modern World, the Scottish People. Now, Scotland's this little tiny country. It's only got, 5.5 million people. But what they did in about the 1700s, they insisted on having public schools for their country to teach the children how to read the Bible. That was it. That was the whole purpose, just to teach the kids how to read the Bible. They went from being a bunch of half-ass illiterate dummies to being probably, pound for pound, the Scottish have probably achieved more than any other country in the history of the world. I say that reluctantly. Basically, Scotland reminds me of ancient Greece. Okay, up north in Scotland you got the Highlanders. In ancient Greece it was the Spartans, kind of this rough and violent people, lived based on honor, very poor. And then, further south, you got Athens in ancient Greece, and in Scotland, you had Edinburgh, was the big educated city. But what I'm trying to say, for 5.5 billion people, I recommend you study them. You'll freak out. I've never seen so few people have so much intellectual academic achievement as the Scots did in the 1700s. It really is extraordinary. I thought this guy was exaggerating, kind of a BSer, but I know he's a good historian, so I read his book, Arthur Herman. I'll do a book review on it in the future, but I was like, holy crap. I'm actually wearing a Scottish tie right now. The Cross of Andrew, the X, He's one of the disciples who was martyred for Christ. But when I looked at this tie first, it kind of reminded me of the Speed Racer tie, Racer X. Okay, but anyways, because he got crucified with his body position like the letter X rather than a Latin cross, like the letter T. All right, let's continue with the quotes of Benjamin Rush. He says, "The Bible contains more knowledge necessary to man in his present state than any other book in the world. The gospel of Jesus Christ prescribes the wisest rules for the just conduct in every situation in life." That's also true. And the reason it matters so much is people say, oh, well, they need to learn math and all this other stuff. Oh, BS. Nobody ever uses math other than addition, subtraction, and multiplication. That's like it. Okay. I'm a triple board Harvard trained doctor. I never do anything in math that I didn't know by third grade. Okay. It's a joke. Math's a waste of time. It makes you stupid because you don't learn the other things you should be learning. All right, so what did I want to say? I say the great thing about reading the Bible is you remember it. That stuff is memorable. And because it's memorable and it's moral, it gives you a moral foundation, and then you can build upon it. Versus, the way public schools teach, everything's forgotten. Spanish with grammar, forget everything. Math that's abstract with no meaningful real-world examples, forget everything. History taught on dates rather than biographies, names of people, and heroes, everything's forgotten. Okay, let us continue with Benjamin Rush quotes. He says, "If we were to remove the Bible from public schools, we would be wasting so much time punishing crimes and taking so little pains to prevent them. By withholding the knowledge of scriptures from children, we deprive ourselves of the best means of awakening moral sensibility in their minds. The Bible, when not read in schools, is seldom read in any subsequent period of life. The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books because it contains the greatest portion of that kind of knowledge which is calculated to produce private and public happiness." Yeah, kids would be much better off homeschooled. They'd be much better off homeschooled. I don't care if the parents are stupid. They'd be much better off homeschooled. You can't do worse than the public schools. Turn the kids into atheists, make them hate their parents, make them be conformist and bad behaved. And how could you do worse than that? Okay. The people were much more literate in the 1800s. People don't even understand how stupid the modern younger generation is nowadays in comparison to how they used to be. Just read about the 1800s. 1800s, as Ayn Rand had said, were aesthetic light years ahead of us. I'm currently reading this biography of Johann von Wolfgang Goethe. And, he's talking about, this I like to read in French, this is what I like to read in English, this is what I like to read in German, this is what I like to read in Latin. Okay, that's how smart those people used to be. Okay. All right, now here's another good one by Benjamin Rush. "Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and to deny equal privileges to others." Yeah, the drug dealers have taken over conventional medicine. That is pretty obvious. What's his name? Peter Gochke, that statistician from the Cochrane Review. He's friends with Dr. McDougall. He wrote a book called, Organized Medicine is Organized Crime, something like that, or psychiatry or something. Hey, it's a business to sell drugs, okay? And anybody gets in the way of that, they're going to screw them over, okay? So it's never going to change. I have zero expectation that healthcare will ever change. There's too much money. And once a corporation is $1 billion, man, it can do whatever it wants. It can buy the politicians, buy the journals, buy the scientists. It buys everything. It's a lot of money. Like Cicero said, the great Roman, the greatest of all Romans ever, he said, there's almost nothing that can stand up to big money. Unfortunately, that's true. The only thing that can stand up to big money is Christianity. And all the big money, they're doing everything they can to prevent Christianity don't make a comeback. Okay, and the pros are all stupid, walking around, I don't know, I guess things just happen, shit happens. They're clueless. Okay, he continues, Benjamin Rush. "Freedom can only exist in a society of knowledge. Without learning, men are incapable of knowing their rights. The great enemy of salvation of man, in my opinion, never invented a more effective means of limiting Christianity in the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible in schools. No, the Bible should be read in schools." I read stories about how, back in the 1800s, there was a big fuss between the Protestants and the Catholics and the other sects of Christianity, which version of the Bible should be read. And in my opinion, it really doesn't matter. Okay, don't get me wrong. There's minor little nuance differences here and there, but they're pretty insignificant. The message of Christ doesn't change. There's going to be little nuance in, what is a church? Is it an assembly of people? Is it run by a priest? Is it run by a group of elders? Okay, you can fuss about that all day long, but the message of Christ doesn't change. All men are created in the image of God. They're equal in the eyes of God. That which you do to the least of my brethren, you're doing to me. Be nice to each other, forgive each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't change any version of the Bible. And that's what people need. Okay, he continues. The only foundation for a republic is to be laid in religion. Without this, there can be no virtue, and without virtue, there can be no liberty. Liberty is the object and the life of all republican governments. Yeah, that's the other thing, too. You always hear people saying, oh, America's a democracy. Screw democracy. We're not supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic. And it's sort of like based on the Roman Republic, which was the best time in Rome. Okay, the most free time in Rome. Okay, we profess to be Republicans, and yet we neglect the only means of establishing and perpetuating our Republican form of government. That is universal education of our youth in the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible. For this divine book, above all others, favors that equality amongst mankind, that respect for just laws, and all those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of republicanism. Okay, so that's Benjamin Rush, founding father of the United States of America, signer of the Declaration of Independence of the USA. Okay, and I also want to tell you, I've read a lot about the founding fathers. They would have mass in the same room where they legislate. They would all pray together. Okay, they would go together, all of them, almost every single one of them, in groups to mass. Okay, they would go to mass several times a week, many of them. Okay, they would collect different versions of the Bible. They're religious fanatics in comparison with people nowadays. Okay, and that's not widely known. Okay, the modern church has been castrated with the 503 exemption rule in the 1960s. You know, that weasel Lyndon Baines Johnson really messed things up. Okay, so that they can't say anything controversial or they lose their tax exemption, so they become a bunch of chicken shits. Okay, and well, I won't even get into all that stuff now. But anyways, I hope you found that helpful. Benjamin Rush.